Rian had always known the day would come when he would have to return to Syrthos. The marks on his palm, which he had hidden for so many years, had started to itch with the weight of an old promise. He had spent years drifting across the stars, running from his past. But the past always found its way back to him. And now, standing on the edge of the royal courtyard, the familiar scent of alien flowers and the harsh winds of Syrthos seemed to mock him. He had sworn never to return after the betrayal, after the failed mission that had cost so much. It was a mistake. The war, the violence, and everything that came with it had changed him. His hands, once steady and strong, now trembled at the thought of what might happen when he came face to face with Serena. Serena. The name alone sent a shiver down his spine. He could still remember the way she had looked that last time, her radiant green skin glowing in the dim light of the palace garden, her hair flowing like liquid gold in the wind. He had never wanted to leave her. He had promised her that he would always come back. But promises, it seemed, were made to be broken. As Rian walked through the grand palace gates, his heart began to race. The royal guards, clad in their shimmering armor, eyed him with suspicion. He was a human, a foreigner in their lands, and the mark on his palm was a symbol of something long forgotten, something the Empire had tried to erase.
"State your business, traveler!"
one of the guards barked. Rian took a deep breath, his eyes lingering on the ornate palace behind them.
"I've come to speak with Princess Serena." The guard scoffed, clearly not believing him.
And why would she want to see a human? But before the guard could say more, the doors to the palace opened, and a figure appeared. Serena. She was as beautiful and regal as Rian remembered, her emerald eyes locking onto his with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The years had passed, but the bond between them hadn't disappeared. If anything, it had only grown stronger. "Rian," she finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "Why did you come back after all these years?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of everything they had once shared. Rian opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he say? He wasn't sure if he even had the right to explain. There was too much history between them, too much pain, and too many memories of things they could never fix. Serena took a step forward, her gaze never leaving him. "You disappeared. You left me to deal with the Empire's lies and the war. I don't understand. After all this time, why return?" Rian's heart ached at the look in her eyes. She had every right to be angry, to hate him for leaving her alone in the midst of everything. He could still feel the weight of the decision he had made to walk away from her and everything they had built together. But there was no turning back now.
"I came back because I have no choice," Rian said finally, his voice hoarse.
"There's something I need to show you, something you need to understand." Serena raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "And what is that?" The mark on his palm was visible now, a swirling symbol of ancient design, glowing faintly in the light. Serena's eyes widened in recognition. "The mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. You still have it?" Rian nodded, his expression somber. "I never wanted to forget it. It was a promise, Serena. A promise I failed to keep." She took a step back, as if the mark burned her.
"You think this mark means anything now? After everything?"
"After you disappeared without a word. After I..." Her voice faltered, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. "Why now? Why come back after all these years?" "I had to," Rian said quietly, his gaze falling to the ground.
"There's something happening, something bigger than us.
"I need your help." Serena looked at him for a long time, the conflict in her eyes visible. She wanted to trust him, to believe that he hadn't come back just for himself, but for something bigger. But after so much time, after the lies and the betrayal, she wasn't sure if she could. "What could you possibly need from me?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. I'm not the same man I was when I left, Rion said, lifting his eyes to meet hers.
And the threat we face, it's something we can't handle alone.
I came back to stop it. For a moment, Zarena said nothing. She looked at the mark again, and then back at Ryan. The pain in her eyes softened, but there was still hesitation there. I don't know if I can trust you, she whispered. Ryan didn't expect her to forgive him, not immediately, but he knew that this was their only chance. Please, he said, his voice urgent. The empire you once ruled is falling apart. It's worse than you think. And if we don't act now, everything we fought for, it'll be destroyed. Zarena stood there, frozen, as the weight of his words sank in. The years of silence between them had created a chasm, and she had no idea if she could cross it. But as she looked at the man standing before her, the man she once loved, the man who had returned with a purpose, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to fix the wrongs of the past. Fine, she said finally, her voice low but steady. We'll talk. But I'm not making any promises. Rion nodded, relieved, but fully aware of how fragile the moment was. That's all I'm asking. As they turned and walked into the palace together, the familiar weight of their past loomed over them. But for the first time in years, Rion felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could make things right. Maybe, with Zarena's help, they could stop the darkness that was spreading across the galaxy. But as they passed through the grand doors, Rion couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was on the brink of something much worse than anyone could have imagined, and he wasn't sure if they would be able to stop it in time. The palace had changed. It had always been grand, but the years of war and political upheaval had left their mark. The once polished floors were now worn, and the once glowing lights had dimmed, as though the building itself had grown tired. The air was thick with the weight of 1,000 decisions made in dark corners, away from the eyes of the people. Rion followed Zarena through the winding hallways, his steps measured, but his mind racing. He had expected a cold reception, but the silence between them was more suffocating than he had imagined. Zarena walked ahead of him, her green skin glowing faintly under the dim lights, her posture as regal as ever. But there was an edge to her movements that told him she was not the same woman he had left behind all those years ago. He couldn't blame her. He hadn't expected her to be. They reached a large chamber, its high walls lined with tapestries depicting the rise and fall of her people. Zarena stopped in front of a stone table, the remains of old maps scattered across its surface. She motioned for Rion to sit, and he did, his body stiff as he waited for her to speak. Zarena stood by the window, looking out over the city of Syrthos. Her empire, once vast and unshakable, was now fractured, its power slipping away piece by piece. She had inherited the throne at a time when the galaxy was already on the brink of war, but the last few years had been far worse than anyone had imagined. Her people were divided, the factions of the royal family fighting for control, and the human colonies that had once been her allies had turned their backs on her. The tension in the room was palpable as she turned to face him, her eyes cold but calculating. I still don't understand why you've come back, she said, her voice low but firm. After everything, after the betrayal, the lies, and the war, why now? Why didn't you stay away as you promised? Why drag me into this mess again? Ryan's heart tightened. He had expected anger, but the bitterness in her words stung more than he anticipated. He had made a mistake, and he knew it. He had left her when she needed him the most, and now, years later, he was asking for her help. It felt like he was asking her to trust him all over again. But trust was something that, once broken, was never easily repaired.
I never wanted to hurt you, he said, his voice thick with emotion.
But I had to leave. The empire was falling apart, and I was the reason it was going down. I thought if I disappeared, maybe things would settle. But I was wrong.
Everything I did, it only made things worse. Zarena's eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt him.
She was listening, which, to Ryan, felt like a small victory. She hadn't done that the last time they spoke, when he had tried to explain himself. Back then, the walls had gone up between them, and no amount of words could bring them down. But now, she was at least willing to hear him out. "Why didn't you trust me enough to stay?" she asked, her voice softer now, but there was still a bitterness lingering in her tone. "I didn't want you to be dragged into the mess I caused," Ryan said, his gaze dropping to the table in front of him. "I thought that if I stayed, I'd put you in even more danger. The Empire was collapsing, Serena."
"I couldn't risk you being caught in the middle of that."
She walked over to the table and placed her hands on the edge, leaning forward. "And you thought running away would solve everything?"
"You thought that if you disappeared, the Empire would just magically fix itself?"
"I thought it would buy us time," he admitted. "But I was wrong. The war didn't end, and the Empire didn't fix itself. It only got worse. And now, there's something else out there. Something bigger than anything we faced before." Zyrena's expression faltered for a moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Ryan could see the conflict in her, the part of her that still cared for him, the part that remembered their time together. But there was also the weight of her crown, the responsibility she bore for her people and her empire. She couldn't afford to let her emotions cloud her judgment.
What do you mean?
She asked, her voice steady but with a note of concern.
There's a faction, Ryan said, his voice growing more urgent.
A group that was once part of the Empire, a group thought to have been destroyed in the last war. They've resurfaced, and they're stronger than ever. They've been working in the shadows, pulling strings, and now they're ready to take control of the galaxy. If we don't act fast, everything we've fought for will be lost. Serena looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a long moment she said nothing, and Ryan could feel the weight of her stare. The mark on his palm, the mark that had once bound them together, seemed to burn against his skin, reminding him of everything he had left behind. The years of pain, of regret, and the promise he had made to her. "You're asking me to trust you again," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "After everything that's happened, after everything you've done."
I know it's asking a lot, but this isn't just about us anymore.
It's about the future of your empire, your people. I can't do this alone, and neither can you.
Zyrena stood there for a moment, her fingers tracing the edges of the table.
Her mind was working, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had always been a ruler, a leader who put the needs of her people above everything else. But this was different. This wasn't just a political decision. This was personal. And as much as she hated to admit it, she knew that Ryan was right. If she didn't help him, if she didn't take action now, everything they had fought for could crumble. But there was still a part of her that hesitated, that wondered if this was another trap, another mistake. She had trusted him once, and it had cost her everything. Could she trust him again? Could she risk it? "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice breaking the silence. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, for what you left me to face." Ryan stood up and walked toward her, his steps slow but determined.
I don't expect forgiveness, Verena, but I'm asking for a chance.
A chance to fix this, to stop what's coming. Zyrena looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. For a moment, she saw nothing but sincerity. The years had changed him, but they hadn't destroyed him. And in that moment, she realized something. No matter how much she wanted to hate him, no matter how much she wanted to push him away, she couldn't. "I'll help you," she said quietly. "But don't think for a second that this is over. I'm not doing this for you."
I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, and if you betray me again, there will be no forgiveness.
Ryan nodded, a small relieved smile tugging at his lips.
"I don't deserve your trust, but I won't betray it again, I swear." They stood there, in the silence that followed, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy. But for the first time in years, they had a chance to fight together again, to stop the darkness that was creeping across the galaxy. And that was a start.